Hello and welcome. Thank you for listening in. We are at Hyderabad today for our annual GCC conclave, and today we released our Vision 2030 report, which talks about the evolution of GCCs over the next 4 to 5 years. To speak more about it with me, I have Kunal Ghatak. Kunal has spent many years within the GCC ecosystem, and his views on this topic is going to be enriching and exciting at the same time. So thank you, Kunal, for joining me today. Let's just dive a little deeper into our report that we just released at the Hyderabad conclave. Now, in the report, Kunal, we speak about a large number of GCCs setting up shop in India in the future, and specifically till the year 2030, which is about the 2400 mark. I know you work with a large number of multinational corporations around the world. What are you hearing today? Are they really excited about this GCC ecosystem developing in India? So tell us a little bit about what you're hearing.
So Arindam, I think it's very exciting in the sense that India is very favorably positioned. So a lot of the companies in the Western Hemisphere who are doing well are today short on talent. So they are looking at India as a way to augment their skills. In the opposite, there are a lot of companies in the Western Hemisphere who are not doing well, who are also looking at India to sort of get that labor arbitrage benefit. So in both cases, India is very favorably placed. And like the report says, I just see GCCs growing and going up in numbers for the next very many years to come.
Got it. And do you see, Kunal, a distinctive difference in terms of how the US-based companies see the evolution of the GCC ecosystem versus the European companies? Just to add to that, we all know that the number of European companies in India are far lower than what we see from American side, right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, today, if you look at the mix of GCCs in India, about 2/3 of them are American companies. And that is largely driven by the fact that there are no language barriers. Whereas if you look at some of the European countries and the large number of countries within Europe, there are certain language nuances, whether it be France or Italy or Germany or the others. But having said that, I do continue to see European companies get more and more into the GCC bandwagon. It's not that they're a small number now, but of course, compared to the American companies, it's lower. And I think that's largely driven because of the language requirements.
Got it. So language requirements is an important part. Now, let's talk a little bit about talent. You know, during the COVID time, huge talent war, rising costs, people scrambling all over to find people to fill the roles, right? How do you see this changing in the next 4 or 5 years? What are some of the roles that you see emerging which are not existent today?
So, Arindam, I still think that a lot of the drive for talent is still continue to be driven by quantity. Yeah. But as the GCCs mature and as the GCCs who've been here for a while continue to grow up in terms of value, I think there'll be more demand for quality. Yeah. So more focus on niche skills, whether that be in technology or whether that be more niche functional skills, which is very industry focused. For example, merchandising in retail or finance, FP&A in finance. So I do see it moving away from quantity rather, to more focus on quality.
And we said in the report, Kunal, that about 4.5 million people will be employed by GCCs. And you know, in one of our previous discussions, you mentioned about indirect employment. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, today, the GCCs employ about, 1:4 in terms of indirect employment, right? And this is largely coming from support services, housekeeping, security, local transportation, etc. So when you look at that number of 4.5 million, which we predict by 2030, it's actually going to help generate another additional 18 million jobs. And also, given the fact that the big six, right, where offshoring is currently centered, are also getting saturated very fast. Right. I do see this as a tremendous opportunity for some of the tier 2 cities, like for example, Coimbatore, Trivandrum, Bhubaneswar, Jaipur, Kochi, where we are seeing traction today in a sort of a hub and connected cities model where a company could have a larger presence in a Bangalore or a Pune, right, but could have a connected city in a Trivandrum or a Kochi or a Jaipur.
So let's talk about the final point in the report, right? And that was around costs and productivity. I think it's an important point. We did throw caution in the report in terms of rising costs. I know you've been associated with EY's cost and benchmarking survey for a long time. What are some of the trends you are seeing in terms of costs in general?
Yeah. So in costs in general, what we've seen is that 85%-ish of today's per FT cost is largely compensation. And that's, of course, driven by two real factors. One is the wage inflation, naturally, but the second is also the focus on niche skills that I just mentioned. So there is more and more focus on hiring niche skills. So these two have sort of driven the costs up if you sort of benchmark it back into 2019. Of course, a lot of this has also been offset by the fact that travel has significantly gone down in terms of business travel, international business travel. Local transportation costs are again slowly going back as people come back to office, but are still lower as compared to 2019 model where work from home today is much more acceptable. So I do see that cost growing up, but as you compare it even to costs going up in the Western Hemisphere, it definitely looks like labor arbitrage is here to stay for the very foreseeable future.
Excellent. So to just sum up, Kunal, what you mentioned today, you spoke about the fact that, look, these 2,400 centers are still very much a reality. This ecosystem will continue to grow. You see a direct impact on the employment in the country as well as indirect employment as a result of GCCs growing. The cost arbitrage is here to stay. There are discussions today about rising costs, but that will never be that high in the next 4 or 5 years to really cause a major concern. Anything else you want to add, Kunal, before we sort of wrap up?
No, I think the focus is, in India, when it comes to GCCs, you'll have, people at both spectrum. You'll have centers which house as many as 60, 70, 80,000 people, and you'll also have centers, smaller ODC type centers, which could be 50 to 100 people. But I think what the focus will be and the ask will continue to be is how these centers reinvent themselves. Just only being pure labor arbitrage or having the same service catalog over a long period of time, I don't think that will be sustainable. And those kind of GCCs will either get wound up or will move to a more outsourced model where a service provider is able to deliver better benefits. So I think what's really important is how fast the GCCs can continue to reinvent themselves and do something different, but continue to do things faster and better.
So reinvention is a key aspect. Thank you so much, Kunal, for joining me today. And thank you so much for listening in. The report is available online. Please do download it, read it, and do send us your comments. Thank you once again, and we'll see you for the next video.